A storm is rising in the Middle East, one that was spoken of thousands of years ago by a prophet who saw beyond his own time. Nations that once had no reason to unite are now forming strange alliances. The world watches as old enemies of Israel grow louder and ancient words begin to unfold before our eyes. The prophecy of Ezekiel, once thought impossible, is now echoing through modern history. What was written on ancient scrolls may soon play out on the world's stage. The word of the Lord came to the prophet Ezekiel, saying, "Son of man," which is what God often called him, "turn your face toward Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and speak these words against him. Say, this is what the Lord God declares. Behold, I am against you, O Gog, the chief ruler of Meshech and Tubal." This is the prophecy given through Ezekiel, a message describing a coming event that will take place in the Middle East, a great invasion against the land of Israel. What makes this prophecy unique is that it speaks not of one single nation, but of several nations joining forces. Unlike the prophecy of Psalm 83, which involves nations that directly border Israel, the prophecy found in Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39 involves nations that do not share a border with Israel at all. That makes it very distinct from other prophecies. These nations are separated from Israel by great distances, some more than 1,000 miles away. From a natural point of view, it would seem very unlikely, especially in ancient times, that such distant nations could ever unite or coordinate an attack against Israel. In earlier centuries, some scholars who studied the Bible could not imagine how this could happen. They assumed Ezekiel's words must be symbolic, not literal, because there seemed to be no practical way for those nations so far apart to cooperate militarily. Yet, the very thing that made it seem impossible back then is what points to its fulfillment in modern times. In today's world, long distances no longer prevent nations from joining together for war. Technology, global politics, and instant communication make it possible for nations thousands of miles apart to act together. That's why this prophecy seems more likely to take place in our era than at any other time in history. The Lord said that in that future day, evil thoughts would rise in the mind of Gog, and he would form a wicked plan. He would say, "I will attack the land of unwalled villages. I will go against a people who live in safety, all of them living without walls or gates. I will go there to take goods, to seize wealth, to plunder the land, and to stretch my hand against those who were once in ruins but are now inhabited. A people gathered from many nations, rich in livestock and possessions, living at the very center of the world." This points directly to the modern era. In the previous chapters of Ezekiel, chapters 36 and 37, the Lord speaks about the Jewish people being scattered across the entire earth and then being brought back to their land. That return from exile has only happened in our generation. God says, "My sheep wandered to the ends of the earth, but I will gather them again." He speaks of dry bones being brought back to life, meaning the rebirth of Israel from nothing. That prophecy fits the modern revival of the Jewish nation more than any other time in history. God also says that after bringing his people back, he will pour out his Spirit on them. These things were not fulfilled in ancient times. They are for now and for the days to come. So, when will this great invasion take place? The Bible tells of a final war, a great conflict at the end of the age. The prophet Zechariah writes, "The Lord, who stretched out the heavens and laid the foundation of the earth and formed the spirit of man within him, says this, Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup that causes trembling to all the surrounding peoples. When they lay siege to Jerusalem, it will also be against Judah. In that day I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all nations. All who try to lift it will be hurt, and all nations of the earth will be gathered against it." That is the final war described in prophecy. It sounds unbelievable that one small nation could become the focus of the entire world, but we can already see it happening. The eyes of the world are constantly on Israel. Every nation seems to have an opinion about it, and many hold deep hatred toward it. The prophet Joel also speaks of this same time. For behold, in those days and at that time, when I restore the fortunes of Judah and Jerusalem, I will gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. There I will enter into judgment with them. Again, all nations are mentioned. In the book of Revelation chapter 16, John writes that he saw 3 unclean spirits, like frogs, come out of the mouths of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. These spirits are demonic forces that go out to the kings of the earth to gather them together for battle on the great day of God Almighty. They gather them to a place called Armageddon. All these passages describe the same final conflict. All the nations of the world united against Israel. But when we turn to Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39, we notice something different. Ezekiel does not mention all nations, only a certain group of them. This shows that the war described in Ezekiel is not the same as the final war of Armageddon. It is a different event. Right now, there are nearly 200 nations on earth, yet Ezekiel names only a handful in his prophecy. The last war described in Revelation centers on Jerusalem itself, where all nations gather to destroy it. But in Ezekiel's prophecy, the invading forces come to take spoils, to plunder the land, and to occupy it. Their goal is not total destruction, but greed and conquest. After the final war of Revelation, the Messiah returns, and his kingdom begins. But in Ezekiel's account, the war ends with the burial of the dead, not with the return of the Messiah. This means that the war described by Ezekiel in chapters 38 and 39 is not the same as the Battle of Armageddon. It is a separate conflict that happens before that ultimate battle. Now we turn to identify the nations mentioned in Ezekiel's prophecy. The Lord said, I am against you, O Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Some translations also include the word Rosh, but this is debated because in Hebrew it can mean head or chief, not necessarily a nation's name. We will leave that question for later, but we can identify the other names with greater certainty. The nations listed include Gog, Magog, Meshech, Tubal, Gomer, and Togarmah. These names all point to the region of ancient Asia Minor. Today that region is known as Turkey. Modern Turkey covers the territory that once held these ancient peoples. Next, the name Cush is mentioned. In ancient times, Cush referred to the land south of Egypt, the region of Nubia, which today is known as Sudan. Then comes Put, which is linked in ancient writings to the people of Libya. The Jewish historian Josephus even wrote that there was a river in North Africa once called Put, which later became known as Libya. So Put includes parts of modern-day Libya and possibly also Algeria and Tunisia, but its main focus is Libya. The final nation mentioned in this group is Paris, known for thousands of years as Persia. Only in the 1930 S did the nation officially change its name from Persia to Iran. So, when Ezekiel speaks of Paris, he is speaking of modern-day Iran. From this, we can see the main nations identified so far: Turkey, Iran, Libya, and Sudan. The role of Russia, which some believe is connected to Gog and Magog, we will explore later, since that part is more complex and debated. Ezekiel foretold that in the last days these nations would turn against Israel. Has that come true? When we look at the world today, we can see that it has. Turkey, though it maintains official relations with Israel, has turned increasingly hostile under its current leadership. President Erdogan has pushed his country toward radical Islam and has repeatedly spoken out harshly against Israel. He has tried to position himself as a leader of the Islamic world, uniting other nations against Israel. Sudan, too, has a long history of hostility toward Israel. For years it was part of the Arab League boycott and served as a safe haven for anti-Israel groups. Only recently have there been slight signs of change, but deep-rooted animosity still exists. Libya has also been openly hostile toward Israel for decades. Under Gaddafi and even after his fall, the hatred has remained. Iran, perhaps the most vocal and aggressive of all, constantly threatens Israel's existence. The Iranian regime has repeatedly declared its desire to wipe Israel off the map. It funds and supports groups like Hezbollah and Hamas, who attack Israel from the north and south. Ezekiel's prophecy perfectly matches the modern political landscape. Nations that have little in common except for their opposition to Israel are being drawn together. In ancient times, these same regions existed under different names, but the same spirit of hatred continues. The prophecy shows that this coalition will form in the last days, driven by greed, ambition, and deep hostility toward the people of God. This prophecy is not only about war, but also about God's power and his faithfulness. It shows that even when powerful nations gather against Israel, God himself will intervene. He will defend his people, showing the world that he alone is the Lord. The defeat of these nations will be so great that the people of Israel will spend months burying the dead. The land will be cleansed, and the world will know that the God of Israel reigns. So when we see the alliances forming today, the rising hatred, and the growing pressure on Israel, we should not be surprised. It was all foretold long ago. The words given to Ezekiel remind us that history is not random. It is unfolding according to God's plan. Every prophecy has its appointed time, and when it comes to pass, the world will see the truth of his word. It is an Islamic nation for a reason. Now the thing is, for a long time, that's how it has been. Recently there was a coup that took control of the government and changed things a bit. They relaxed some of their policies, but Sudan still remains a mostly Islamic state. Throughout much of its history, it has been seen as an enemy of Israel. We'll see what the future brings, because sometimes one major shift can change everything. Libya, too, is a Muslim nation and has been a long-time rival of Israel. Many of you might remember the rule of Muammar Gaddafi. I remember him as well, and so do many others. There have been a few movements or talks hinting at possible dialogue with Israel, but the relationship still stays hostile. That brings us to Iran. Among all the nations, Israel is more concerned about Iran than any of its other neighbors. In fact, many Arab countries are also worried about Iran because it poses a major threat to the entire region. So, if we look at the nations mentioned by the prophet Ezekiel, we can see that Turkey is Muslim, Sudan is Muslim, Libya is Muslim, and Iran is Muslim. Ezekiel could not have known that one day these same nations would already have a mindset of hostility and opposition toward the Jewish state. The prophecy from Ezekiel speaks of a ground invasion of Israel. It says that after Israel would return to its land, rebuild its cities, replant its fields, and become inhabited again, there would come a time when an alliance of nations would form to attack Israel. This invasion would involve several nations, and it would be a major event with great consequences. Russia may or may not be involved. We'll talk about that and America in the next discussion. But this invasion will be massive in scale and global in impact. Right now, two of the nations mentioned, Turkey and Iran, are both competing to lead the Islamic world and to rally the anti-Israel movement. Each is trying to claim dominance in the Muslim world and to stand as the defender of those against Israel. Both nations hold significant power. Iran especially is a serious concern to the world because its actions and ambitions make it unpredictable and dangerous. Many nations don't even know how to handle or contain Iran's growing influence. There's a lot more to this story. Russia too plays a role, and all of it connects in ways that will affect America and the future, as well as tie into the prophecies found in the book of Revelation. That's something we'll discuss next time. But tonight I want to show you something I discovered as I started digging deeper into all this. It's something that I couldn't have shown you even a year ago. I don't think anyone has ever clearly seen it like this before. These are the very same powers spoken of in ancient times. Powers that will one day launch a great invasion of Israel. Until recently, there hadn't been a large-scale ground invasion of Israel since 1973. That is, until this autumn, the first such invasion in 50 years. Could this recent event be a preview of what's to come? Could there be a connection between the invasion we witnessed and the nations that Ezekiel prophesied would attack Israel in the end times? In other words, could what happened on October 7th be linked to the nations listed in Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39? Could this be a sign of prophecy unfolding before our eyes? What I discovered might surprise you. Here are some real headlines that I came across. Turkish-backed groups in Libya have been smuggling weapons to Hamas. So, Turkey, which represents Gog in Ezekiel's prophecy, is working together with Libya, referred to as Put, to aid in attacks against Israel. And that leaves one main invader mentioned in the prophecy, Persia, which is modern-day Iran. Could Iran have played a part in what happened on October 7th? The answer is yes, and even more than any other country. In many ways, Iran, or Persia as named in Ezekiel, has been the shadow force behind everything. Listen to these statements taken from reports and officials. Hamas has relied heavily on Iran for the funding of its military wing. US officials have stated that Iran has provided Hamas with money, weapons and training. Another report says that Hamas operates with an assortment of weapons designed or built with Iranian technology. Iran has provided the materials and expertise needed for Hamas to create a huge arsenal of more than 10,000 rockets. Another statement says that these irregular tactics culminated on October 7th in a massive assault on Israel, and one more says that Iran's sponsorship played a major role in enabling Hamas to begin the fighting in Gaza. The truth is, without Iran, the Persia of Ezekiel's vision, the events of October 7th would not have happened. Before we continue, I'd like to encourage you to support this ministry and channel by subscribing. Your support helps us reach more people and spread the word of God further. Just hit the subscribe button below. And now, let's return to the message. Now, let me show you something interesting. I took several real headlines about recent events and then replaced the modern names with the original biblical names used by Ezekiel. Let's see what happens. The German says, Turkey-backed groups in Libya smuggling weapons to Hamas. Now, replacing with the biblical names, it becomes Gog-backed groups in Put smuggling weapons to Hamas. Let's look at another. Israel repeatedly accused Iran of shipping weapons to Hamas through Sudan. Replacing the names, we get Israel repeatedly accused Persia of transferring weapons to Hamas through Kush. Let's look at another. Israel repeatedly accused Persia of transferring weapons to Hamas through Kush. Another example. Iran and Hezbollah have smuggled weapons to Hamas through the Sinai via Sudan and Libya. Translating it biblically, we get Persia and Hezbollah have smuggled weapons to Hamas through Sinai via Kush and Put. And another one. Militias in Libya funded by Iran and Turkey are helping Palestinian groups bypass Israel's blockade. Replace the names again and it reads, Militias of Put funded by Persia and Gog are helping armed Palestinian groups bypass Israel's blockade. Buggles. When we restore the original biblical names, something remarkable happens. The modern headlines start aligning almost word for word with the prophecy of Ezekiel 38. When Ezekiel's words were first written, the nations he mentioned were not enemies of Israel. In fact, most had little or no connection to Israel at all. For centuries, this prophecy was considered a mystery by many scholars. I found a commentary written in the 19th century discussing Ezekiel 38 and 39. It was well studied, but it said this: the objections to a literal interpretation of the prophecy are that the nations listed are located far apart from one another and from Israel. Therefore, it seems unlikely that they could ever join together, for example, the Persians and the Libyans. The writer concluded that it must require a symbolic or non-literal interpretation, because such unity seemed impossible. But here we are, over 2,500 years later, living in the 21st century, and every one of those ancient nations mentioned by Ezekiel has, against all odds, become hostile toward Israel. Beyond that, those same countries, the ones predicted to one day invade Israel, have already, through proxies, been engaged in conflict with Israel. This is not yet the full fulfillment of the prophecy, but it is certainly a powerful sign. The same nations that Ezekiel said would unite in a future invasion have now played a role in the recent attacks that shocked the entire world. The prophecy of Ezekiel is unfolding before us in pieces, showing that the foundation has already been set. The full realization of Ezekiel's vision is still ahead. The path may take many turns, and the timing rests in God's hands. But what happened on October 7th, 2023, stands out as the first time in history that every nation mentioned in that ancient prophecy was involved, directly or indirectly, in a large-scale assault on Israel. The Gaza Strip has been under strict blockades preventing weapons and materials for years. So how did Hamas manage to obtain such an enormous stockpile of weapons? The answer lies in those shadow powers that have been quietly supplying and funding them for years. And among all nations, it was precisely the same ones identified by Ezekiel. Those ancient names brought to life again in modern form. Each of those nations, every single one, played a role in enabling the events of October 7th. If those nations hadn't been involved, that invasion would never have taken place. So think about it. The assault of October 7th was made possible by the exact players Ezekiel wrote about thousands of years ago. That can't be ignored. It's as if the prophecy has been echoing across the ages, and now, in our time, it has begun to take form. Hey, this is Jonathan Kahn. I hope this message blessed you. If you want to go deeper and continue exploring these revelations, make sure to check out the next teaching. You're sure to be inspired and amazed by what comes next.